Have you ever looked at something and been like, man, that looks like it's straight out of the future? And then you wait and you realize the future is now. Just look at some of these modern designs. They look like they were ripped straight out of a sci-fi flick. That got me thinking, were the filmmakers of old actually clever enough to work out these inventions? And if so, are the inventions based off of the films, or did they just know the best way to make that product? To determine that though, we got to work out what's futuristic to us. For example, when it comes to cars, the older cars looked a lot more boxy, whereas newer ones have a nice curve to it, which makes it look more modern to us. But is that just because the old ones were boxy, or is that just a fundamental thing in our brains? In the 18th century, for the first time ever, technological development accelerated to the point where it could actually be seen within a single lifetime, which was the first time that people actually started to speculate about it. This led to the development of the Italian art movement in the 20th century, Futurism. Futurism wanted to create compositions that expressed the dynamicism, energy, and movement of modern life. Whilst it didn't need to represent the future, its focus was to represent a dynamic vision of the future. As such, they often portrayed urban landscapes and new inventions such as cars, trains, and aeroplanes. They glorified speed, violence, and the working class, thinking that they would be able to incite change in their future. How effective were they at predicting the future? The following artists were not all part of the Futurism movement, but they all created works within the same time period, and they were trying to talk about similar ideas to Futurism. Now, some made outlandish depictions such as flying cars, flying delivery services, or flying street lamps. I think they really had an obsession with flying. But others made some pretty accurate guesses with the information they had. The March of Intellect depicts a tube between London and Bengal, allowing users to travel through, which could be interpreted as a modern subway or even a bullet train. We'll Be Happy then shows us a huge assortment of devices designed to distract us from the mundanity of modern life. Now, it might not be as extreme as all the devices depicted here, but this happens in modern day with phones, TV, social media, and even ads that are designed to change our life and give us something better. So I think this is a fairly accurate prediction. In Aeropedia, artist Thomas Baldwin represents a never seen before aerial view of the world, which he thinks will be more accessible as technology begins to develop. I'm sure you can guess this one. Google, Apple, or whatever maps you use, all use GPS and satellite to be able to show us this anytime, anywhere on our phones. Getting back to science fictions, one else being the creator of science fiction, H.G. Wells, who is accredited with predicting technology's march forward within his novel, The Future Through Yesterday.
Future Tech on here. I just wanted to pop in and say The Future Through Yesterday was actually a review of Wells' novel by Stephen J. DeCamero. That's my bad, I made that mistake there. Wells' first sci-fi novel was actually The Machine in Time in 1895.
H.G. Wells went on to inspire a 16-year-old boy named Robert H. Goddard. In 1898, Goddard read The War of Worlds, which depicted Martians traveling in spheres to Earth, apparently fired from a huge gun from the surface of Mars, descending onto Earth to invade. Sound familiar? This inspired Goddard, who is now accredited with ushering in the space age, to launch the first liquid-fueled rocket into space. Simon Lake had a similar story after reading in 1898 Jules Verne's novel 20,000 Leagues at just the age of 11. He said, "I began to dream of voyages underwater, but with the impudence which is part of the equipment of the inexperienced. I found faults with some of the features of Jules Verne's Nautilus and set about improving them. Eventually, he executed on his dream and invented the first submarine." I could go on. Jules Verne again went on to inspire Russian engineer Igor Sikorsky with her Clipper of the Clouds, which led to him inventing the first helicopter. Dick Tracy's wrist radio inspired both cell phones and the Apple Watch. Amazon's AI-powered assistant was inspired by Star Trek's voice-activated computer. And to be frank, I could have a whole section here about the inventions that were inspired by Star Trek. Of course, there are heaps of concepts sci-fi can predict. What one man can dream, another can make a reality. When I started this video, I was thinking something more physical that wasn't included in books, the visual design. Doing my research, I think that cars are the best way to represent the visual similarities in design in the media. Now, some of these are concept design from a manufacturer, but in almost all cases, they're actually working on realizing them. So this just gives us some insight into where the design trends are heading. I'm just gonna keep it real with you. I'm not a car guy, so I'm actually just gonna read off the paper. The Mercedes-Benz Vision AVTR is a concept design that was created to promote the new Avatar movie. It has a lot of similarities between the Audi RSQ from the 2005 film I, Robot. Cadillac Interspace has a similar look to the Lexus 2054 from Minority Report 2002. The Wraith brought us the Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor, which looks very similar to the Volkswagen XL1. And I can't quite put my finger on this. The Audi AI Trail looks like maybe one of you might be able to help me out. I swear I've seen it before. It looks like a mix between the car from The Martian, the Argon buggy from Star Trek, and the Warthog from Halo. Of course, you can't talk about futuristic cars without including Speed Racer, which has several cars from the series, which look similar to the DSX-E Tense. And lastly, the most obvious one is the Tesla Cybertruck and the M577 armored personnel carrier from Aliens. Now that I've finished temporarily morphing into a top 10 channel, I had to just give you some context on where we're going so we can head into that most important question. So obviously there's a trend between the look of the cars now and some of the futuristic designs that they were making earlier. So now we have to know, why are they being designed like this? Is this the best way for them to be designed, or is there something better out there? Why the curvy cars in the first place? If you go back to the 1980s, every car in America was remarkably boxy. Once you get to the 90s though, the boxiness is replaced with curves even with cars within the same model. A big reason for this was because of a government mandate to make cars more fuel efficient. And with something like that comes innovation. Technology developed so cars were now being created on the computer rather than out of clay and wood. So when we see cars in sci-fi films, that's just expanding on the factors that we already know about making cars today. You can make your car significantly more aerodynamic, air resistant, and reduce the drag on your car simply just by making it more curved, which has wonderful benefits for a plethora of things, including speed, fuel efficiency, and style. When designing the Audi RSQ for iRobot, Walter De Silva said, "I believe the Audi RSQ is a possible future embedded in a fictional world. The way the car was designed was to take elements that were being developed now and just extrapolate them into what their potential future would be. The Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor was there to show how a lightweight, well-engineered car could reach the same speeds as with a much weaker 2.2-litre four-cylinder engine as the much heavier V8 cars that was popular at the time." I think it's interesting to ask ourselves, what makes something look futuristic? Is it a cultural thing? Is it inherent human nature? Reading through articles about what makes things look futuristic, Lee Ballinetti put together an excellent progression of how artists predicted the future. It seemed to me that the curved look always seems to be a constant. You could argue it's practical, maybe it's just different to what they're used to, but maybe it's just human instinct. There may be many more examples of this, but I think it's safe to say that these writers and filmmakers just had the foresight to think about what the possible future would be and then just implemented that into their work. There's no definitive answer. In some cases, fiction has inspired reality, and in others, fiction is just plain wrong. Going into the future, I think people just have more knowledge at their disposal, and it's just going to give them a clearer vision on how humans are trending. If it is true that history will repeat itself, then we know it'll also predict itself. There is no true way of predicting the future. A lot of the time, writers like to use science fiction to comment or extrapolate on the effects of the advancements that are happening today. What is true is nothing can be engineered without someone creative thinking it up.